There are moments when your life splits in two before and after. I never expected mine to happen at a corner table in an Italian restaurant. Cloth napkin in my lap, family all around me. You build a fortress of expectations over decades, the thank yous that will come, the recognition you've earned. Then watch it crumble over breadsticks and half empty wine glasses. The revelation isn't in what they say, but in what they don't. In the phone screens more magnetic than your face. In the space between, we tried Bellinis because everywhere else was booked. 62 years of breathing, 38 years of marriage, and suddenly you're a ghost at your own celebration. Transparent, your decades of sacrifice evaporating like steam. But here's what they don't tell you about disappearing when you're invisible. You see everything. And what I saw that day changed everything. Because sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the woman everyone has forgotten to notice. Elaine Wilson stood at her bathroom vanity, carefully applying mascara to her lashes, a rare indulgence. At 62, her morning routine usually consisted of a quick splash of water, a dab of moisturizer, and perhaps a hint of tinted lip balm if she was feeling particularly festive. But today was Mother's Day, and for once, she was taking her time. Her reflection revealed the subtle changes time had etched onto her face laugh lines that had deepened into permanent creases, silver strands weaving through her once auburn hair. She had stopped coloring it 3 years ago. Tired of the monthly maintenance and chemical smell, Jack had said he liked the silver anyway, calling it distinguished. Elaine wasn't sure if that was a compliment or not, but she'd taken it as one. Come on, old girl, she murmured to herself, wrestling with the navy blue dress she pulled from the back of her closet. It was a struggle getting it over her shoulders had they broadened, or had the dress shrunk. Probably both. With a final tug, she managed to zip it up, smoothing the fabric over her hips. The dress had been expensive, a splurge for her and Jack's 35th anniversary 2 years ago, and she'd worn it exactly twice since then. Elaine fastened her mother's gold hoop earrings, a treasured heirloom that usually stayed nestled in her jewelry box. Today felt special, worthy of breaking routine. The past week had been unusually secretive around the house. Hannah had called 3 times, which was unprecedented given her daughter's busy schedule running her boutique fitness studio. Nathan had texted asking what time they should be ready, without specifying for what. Even Jack seemed to be in on whatever was happening, smiling to himself whenever the phone rang. She allowed herself a moment of anticipation. 35 years of motherhood, of packed lunches and soccer practices, of college applications and wedding planning, of midnight calls about broken hearts and broken dishwashers surely deserved some recognition. Not that she needed grand gestures, just the acknowledgement that her life's work mattered would be enough. A loud crash from downstairs interrupted her thoughts. Jack, she called out, hurrying down the stairs as quickly as her dress would allow. Are you all right? She found her husband in the kitchen, surrounded by the scattered remains of what appeared to be their good china serving platter. Jack, still in his pajama bottoms and white undershirt, looked up with a grimace. I was trying to reach the fancy coffee mugs, he said sheepishly. Thought we could have the good stuff this morning? Elaine sighed, already reaching for the broom. Those mugs are in the left cabinet, not above the stove. You've lived here for 38 years. Jack. Well, the kitchen's your domain, he replied, stepping back to let her sweep. You look nice, by the way. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed with a notification from the community center. The disaster response training she'd attended yesterday had been rescheduled for additional sessions. She started volunteering there 6 months ago, initially to fill her empty hours, but soon discovering a genuine passion for emergency preparedness. At her age, it felt good to be learning something new, to be valued for more than her cooking and cleaning skills. Jack peered over her shoulder. More senior safety lectures. Disaster response training, she corrected, annoyed at his dismissive tone. And it's not just for seniors. There were people of all ages there yesterday, including that lawyer friend of yours, Linda, right? Yes, Linda was there. She's coordinating the legal advice booth for emergency situations. Elaine tucked her phone away. We actually had an interesting conversation about her words were cut short by the sound of car doors slamming outside. Jack grinned, suddenly alert. They're here. Don't go out yet. I think they want to surprise you. Elaine felt a flutter of excitement as Jack hurried to the front door. Through the kitchen window, she could see Hannah's silver SUV in the driveway, with Nathan's compact car behind it. So they had coordinated something after all. The front door burst open with a chorus of voices. Sophie, her 9-year-old granddaughter, bounded in first, clutching a hand-drawn card nearly as big as she was. Happy Mother's Day, Grandma, she exclaimed, throwing her arms around Elaine's waist. You look so pretty, like a princess. Hannah followed, stylish in yoga pants and a designer blouse that probably cost more than Elaine's entire outfit. Her daughter gave her a quick side hug, already glancing at her watch. Happy Mother's Day, Mom. That color is great on you. Nathan appeared last, bearing a bouquet of mixed flowers wrapped in cellophane, the kind sold at grocery store checkouts. He kissed her cheek and handed them over. Got your favorites, he said, though Elaine noticed they were carnations, not the lilies she'd always preferred. Still, it was the thought that counted. Thank you all for coming, she said, genuinely touched despite the small disappointments. Let me put these in water, and then I'll make us some breakfast. Actually, Hannah interjected, we made reservations at Bellini's for lunch, your favorite Italian place. Remember, we thought it would be nice not to make you cook on Mother's Day? Elaine's heart warmed. Bellini's was indeed special to her. She and Jack had celebrated their engagement there decades ago. The fact that her children remembered meant more than they could know. That sounds wonderful, she said, already mentally rearranging her day. What time is the reservation? 1:00, Nathan replied, checking his phone, which gives us about 3 hours to kill. Jack clapped his hands together. Perfect, just enough time for Sophie to show Grandma her science project while I shower, and then we can all head out. As the others dispersed, Hannah to make work calls, Nathan to check sports scores, Jack to get ready, Elaine found herself alone in the kitchen with Sophie, who was still beaming up at her. Want to see my volcano? Grandma, it actually erupts. I'd love to, sweetheart. Elaine smiled, setting the flowers in a vase. Just let me make some coffee first. Sophie climbed onto a kitchen stool, swinging her legs. Mom says you used to do math for businesses before I was born. Is that true? Elaine paused, surprised by the question. Yes, I was an accountant for about 10 years. I worked for a regional bank, helping small businesses with their finances. Why did you stop? The coffee maker gurgled as Elaine considered her answer. How to explain the complex calculations of family life to a 9-year-old, the cost-benefit analysis of childcare versus her salary, the unspoken expectation that she would be the one to sacrifice her career, the gradual way her identity had been subsumed by the needs of others. Sometimes adults make choices based on what their family needs, she said finally. When your mom was little, she got sick a lot, and it was easier if I stayed home with her. But Mom's not sick anymore. Why didn't you go back out of the mouths of babes? Elaine busied herself with pouring coffee to hide her expression. By then, there were new computer systems and different rules. I would have had to learn everything again. She handed Sophie a glass of orange juice. Besides, someone needed to keep Grandpa Jack in line. Sophie giggled, but her eyes remained curious. Do you miss it? The math stuff. Before Elaine could answer, Jack's voice boomed from upstairs. Elaine, have you seen my blue shirt, the one with the stripes? Second closet, left side, behind your golf shirts, she called back automatically. Sophie nodded sagely. You're like the house's brain. Grandma, you remember everything. The house's brain, Elaine repeated, finding the description oddly fitting. I suppose I am. The next hour passed in a blur of Sophie's enthusiastic science demonstration, which did indeed erupt, leaving a baking soda mess on the patio, Jack's fussing over his appearance, and Hannah's increasingly tense phone conversations. Nathan had disappeared into the den to watch basketball highlights, emerging only when Elaine announced it was time to leave. As they piled into their respective cars, Nathan insisting on driving separately in case he needed to run errands, later Elaine found herself in the passenger seat of Jack's sedan, watching her family through the window. There was something surreal about seeing them all together like this, these adults who had once been completely dependent on her, now leading lives that barely intersected with her own. Everything okay? Jack asked, backing out of the driveway. You're quiet. Just thinking, she replied. It's nice having everyone together. Jack nodded, his attention already on the traffic. That training thing yesterday? How was it interesting? Elaine said, brightening at his unexpected interest. We did a simulation of an earthquake response. I was assigned to the triage team. Sounds intense for a bunch of retirees. It wasn't just retirees. Jack, there were college students, working professionals, even a couple of doctors. Jack raised an eyebrow. Doctors. What are doctors doing at a community center training, volunteering their expertise? Elaine explained. The same reason Linda was there offering legal advice. People want to help their community. Speaking of Linda, Jack said, changing lanes abruptly. I ran into her husband at the hardware store last weekend. He mentioned they're thinking of selling their lake house. Seemed pretty stressed about it. Elaine frowned. That's odd. Linda didn't mention anything about selling the lake house. She did say they were consolidating some investments, but financial trouble, probably, Jack interrupted. Happens to the best of us these days. There was something in his tone that caught Elaine's attention, a forced casualness that didn't quite ring true. Before she could probe further, Jack turned up the radio, effectively ending the conversation. The rest of the drive passed in companionable silence, broken only by Jack's occasional comments about other drivers and Elaine's gentle reminders about the speed limit. As they pulled into the Bellini's parking lot, Elaine spotted Hannah's SUV already parked near the entrance. They beat us here, she noted, surprised. Hannah was notorious for running late. Probably wanted to make sure they held our reservation, Jack said, maneuvering into a spot 2 rows away. Sunday lunch is busy. As they walked toward the restaurant, Elaine felt a surge of warmth seeing the familiar facade. The small Italian bistro had barely changed in the decades since she and Jack had sat at a corner table. Young and in love, planning their future together, he had proposed over tiramisu, sliding a modest diamond ring across the table with hands that trembled slightly. She had said yes without hesitation, certain that life with this kind, hard-working man would bring her everything she wanted. And it had, in many ways, their beautiful children, their comfortable home, the security of Jack's construction business. These were no small achievements. If sometimes she wondered about the path not taken, the career abandoned, the dreams deferred, well, that was simply the cost of the choices she'd made. Mom, over here. Hannah waved from near the entrance, Sophie bouncing beside her. Nathan stood a few feet away, engrossed in his phone. As they approached, Elaine noticed Hannah's expression shift from welcoming to concerned. Dad, are you limping? She asked, eyes narrowing. Jack waved dismissively. Tweaked my back loading some equipment yesterday. It's nothing. You should see Dr. Reeves about that, Hannah insisted. He did wonders for my tennis elbow. Your father doesn't need a fancy sports medicine doctor, Elaine interjected. He just needs to remember he's not 30 anymore when he's lifting heavy things. Jack shot her a grateful look as they entered the restaurant. The hostess, a young woman with an iPad, smiled professionally. Wilson, party of 5. Your table is ready. Follow me, please. They weaved through the crowded dining room to a round table near the back. Elaine noticed with disappointment that they weren't seated at their table, the intimate corner booth where Jack had proposed. Still, the restaurant's warm ambiance and delicious aromas quickly lifted her spirits. Happy Mother's Day, the hostess said to Elaine with a genuine smile. Your server will be right with you. Thank you, Elaine replied, touched by the acknowledgement. As they settled in, Sophie immediately claimed the seat beside Elaine, while Hannah and Nathan automatically reached for their phones. Jack studied the menu intently, though Elaine knew he would order the same thing he always did, chicken parmesan with extra cheese. So, Elaine began, determined to foster some conversation. Nathan, how's the new job going? It's been a month now, right? Nathan looked up briefly. 6 weeks, actually. It's fine. Lot of corporate red tape, but the benefits are good. And your apartment? Have you finished unpacking yet? He shrugged. Most of it. Still need to hang some pictures. Hannah snorted without looking up from her phone. He'll never hang them. Remember his dorm room? Posters leaning against the walls for 4 years? I'm just selective about placement, Nathan defended. Unlike some people who nail things into walls without measuring first. That was one time. Actually, Jack interrupted, clearly trying to head off a sibling squabble. I was thinking of stopping by to help with that. Nate, maybe next weekend I could bring my tools. Before Nathan could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it and stood abruptly. Sorry, need to take this work thing. As he strode away, Hannah rolled her eyes. On a Sunday, doubt it. Probably that girl from his kickball league. Hannah, Elaine admonished gently. Let your brother have some privacy. Whatever. Speaking of privacy. Hannah leaned forward conspiratorially. Sophie, why don't you show Grandma your new app, the one with the funny faces? Sophie eagerly pulled out a tablet from her small backpack. Look, Grandma, you can make yourself into a cartoon. As Sophie demonstrated the app, Elaine noticed Hannah angling away. Phone pressed to her ear. Voice lowered. Another work call? No doubt. Hannah's fitness business had expanded rapidly over the past 2 years, adding locations and services faster than Elaine could keep track of. She was proud of her daughter's success, but sometimes wondered if Hannah had inherited Jack's workaholic tendencies rather than her own more balanced approach to life. Here, Grandma, let me take your picture. Sophie held up the tablet. Elaine instinctively smoothed her hair. Oh, I don't know, sweetheart. I'm not sure I want to see myself as a cartoon. Please, you look so pretty today. Unable to resist her granddaughter's enthusiasm, Elaine relented. All right, but just one. Sophie snapped a photo and immediately began tapping the screen. Now we can give you funny ears, or make you a superhero, or turn you into a queen. I vote for queen, Jack said, reaching for a breadstick. Your grandma deserves a crown. Sophie worked intently for a moment, then proudly displayed her creation. Look, Queen Grandma? Elaine laughed despite herself. The app had transformed her into a regal figure with an elaborate crown and scepter, her silver hair flowing majestically. That's quite impressive, she admitted, though I'm not sure I could balance that crown in real life. You could do anything, Grandma, Sophie said with absolute conviction. Mom says you're the strongest person she knows. Surprised, Elaine glanced at Hannah, who was still absorbed in her call. Had her daughter really said that about her? Their server arrived? A harried-looking young man with a name tag that read, Carlos. Welcome to Bellini's, he recited. Happy Mother's Day to you, he added, nodding at Elaine with a warm smile. Can I start you with some drinks? They ordered wine for the adults except Nathan, who returned just in time to request a craft beer. Sophie proudly ordered a Shirley Temple with extra cherries, please. As Carlos departed, Nathan settled back into his seat with a slightly smug expression. Good news, he announced. That was my team lead. They're fast-tracking me for the Seattle project. Seattle, Elaine asked, surprised. But you just moved back to the area. It's only temporary. Mom, 3 months, maybe 4. Great career opportunity. Jack raised his water glass. Congratulations, son. Always knew you'd go places. Hannah finally ended her call and rejoined the conversation. Seattle has an amazing fitness scene. Maybe you could scope out some locations for me while you're there. Already networking, Nathan teased. Give me a chance to unpack first. Speaking of unpacking, Elaine interjected, have you finished setting up your new apartment? Hannah, how's the view from the 10th floor? Hannah's expression clouded momentarily. It's fine. The kitchen's smaller than I'd like, but the location is perfect for the studio. I still don't understand why you sold your house, Jack said, frowning. It was a great property in a rising neighborhood. Investment strategy, Dad, Hannah replied cryptically. Diversification. Something in her daughter's tone struck Elaine as defensive, but before she could pursue it, Carlos returned with their drinks and took their meal orders. The conversation shifted to safer topics: Sophie's upcoming school play, Jack's golf game, a new Italian restaurant that couldn't compare to Bellini's. Elaine sipped her wine, observing her family with a mixture of love and detachment. They were here, together, celebrating her, yet she felt strangely peripheral to their lives, like a beloved but outdated appliance kept around for sentimental reasons rather than utility. Earth to Mom, Hannah's voice broke through her thoughts. Sophie asked you a question. I'm sorry, sweetheart. Elaine turned to her granddaughter. What did you say? I asked if you could come to my science fair next Friday. I'm showing my volcano. I'd love to, Elaine replied automatically, then hesitated. Wait, that's the same day as my disaster response certification. What time is your fair? 2 o'clock, Sophie said hopefully. School gets out early that day, Elaine calculated quickly. My training ends at noon. I should be able to make it if the traffic isn't too bad. You're still doing that emergency thing? Hannah asked, surprised. I thought it was just a one-time class. It's a comprehensive training program, Elaine explained. 6 weeks of classes and practical exercises. Once I'm certified, I can volunteer during actual emergencies. Hannah and Nathan exchanged a look that Elaine couldn't quite interpret. Isn't that, I don't know, dangerous? Nathan asked. I mean, for someone your age? Elaine felt a flash of irritation. I'm 62, not 92. Besides, there are plenty of roles that don't involve heavy lifting. Communication coordination, resource management, those are perfect for someone my age, with organizational skills. Mom's always been good at managing chaos, Jack said with unexpected support. Remember when the basement flooded during Hannah's birthday party? She had the whole neighborhood forming a bucket brigade while I was still looking for the shutoff valve. The tension eased as they laughed at the memory. Their food arrived, momentarily silencing the conversation as they appreciated the aromas of garlic, basil, and tomato sauce. This is delicious, Elaine said after her first bite of seafood risotto. Thank you all for arranging this. It's a lovely Mother's Day surprise. Actually, Hannah said, looking slightly uncomfortable, we tried getting reservations at that new place on Riverside First Mezzaluna, but they were booked solid. This was kind of our backup plan. Oh, Elaine tried to hide her disappointment. So, Bellini's their special place had been an afterthought. But it worked out better, Jack added quickly. Nowhere makes carbonara like Bellini's. And it's where you and Grandpa got engaged, Sophie piped up. Right. Grandma, Elaine smiled, genuinely touched that Sophie remembered this detail. That's right, sweetie, over at that corner table by the window. Everyone turned to look at the table in question, currently occupied by a young couple gazing adoringly at each other. Seems like yesterday, Jack said softly, reaching for Elaine's hand under the table. The unexpected gesture warmed her heart. The moment was interrupted by a commotion near the entrance. A man was arguing loudly with the hostess, his voice carrying across the restaurant. I don't care if you're booked, it's Mother's Day, for crying out loud. Diners turned to stare as the man's volume increased. The hostess, visibly uncomfortable, tried to explain the reservation policy while gesturing to the crowded dining room. Sir, please lower your voice. We can add you to the waiting list. That's not good enough? The man slammed his hand on the hostess stand. Elaine felt herself tensing, old instincts kicking in. As a bank teller in her 20s, she dealt with her share of irate customers. Without thinking, she began to rise from her seat. Mom, what are you doing? Hannah whispered urgently. Someone needs to help that poor girl, Elaine replied, her eyes on the increasingly agitated man. Before she could move further, a manager appeared and firmly escorted the man outside. The dining room collectively relaxed, conversation resuming. Were you seriously going to confront that guy? Nathan asked, looking at his mother with newfound curiosity. Elaine sat back down, slightly embarrassed. I don't know. Maybe he was being unfair to the hostess. My mom, the vigilante, Hannah joked, but there was a note of respect in her voice. Grandma's a superhero, Sophie declared with absolute certainty. Like in the app. They all laughed, and Elaine felt a rare moment of visibility, of being seen for who she was, not just what she did for them. The rest of the meal passed pleasantly enough, though Elaine noticed both Hannah and Nathan checking their watches with increasing frequency. When Carlos asked if they wanted dessert, Hannah quickly declined. Sorry, but I have a client at 3, she explained. Emergency session for someone training for a marathon. And I need to prep for an early call tomorrow, Nathan added. Elaine swallowed her disappointment. Of course, you both have busy lives. I don't have anywhere to be, Sophie announced proudly. Can I come back to Grandma and Grandpa's house? Hannah looked relieved. Would you mind, Mom? I could pick her up around 6. We'd love to have her, Elaine replied, genuinely pleased by the prospect of extended time with her granddaughter. As Jack requested the check, Elaine excused herself to use the restroom. In the hallway near the ladies' room, she overheard a familiar voice, Hannah speaking in hushed but urgent tones. I know the payment is late. Marcus. Yes, I'm aware of the terms. Look, I just need another 2 weeks. The new location is about to open, and then cash flow won't be an issue. Elaine froze, not wanting to eavesdrop but concerned by her daughter's obvious distress. Using my mother's credit was a one-time emergency measure, Hannah continued, her voice tightening. I can't do that again. No, she doesn't know, and she's not going to find out. Shocked, Elaine backed away quietly, her mind racing. What did Hannah mean about using her credit? When had this happened? And who was Marcus by the time she returned to the table? Her hands were trembling slightly. Hannah was already there, smiling as if nothing was wrong, while Jack signed the credit card receipt. Ready to go, Mom? Hannah asked brightly. Sophie's staying with you, and Nathan's heading straight home. Yes, of course, Elaine replied automatically, her thoughts still whirling from what she'd overheard. Outside in the parking lot, goodbyes were exchanged with promises to call and visit soon. Nathan gave Elaine a perfunctory hug before heading to his car. Hannah kissed her cheek, handed over Sophie's backpack, and was gone with a wave and the screech of tires. Well, Jack said as they walked to their car, Sophie skipping ahead. That was nice, wasn't it? Elaine nodded absently, still processing Hannah's mysterious phone conversation. Jack, have you noticed anything off about Hannah lately? Off in what way? I don't know. Stressed. Maybe about money. Jack shrugged. She's expanding her business. That's always stressful. Why do you ask? Just a feeling, Elaine replied, deciding not to share what she'd overheard until she understood it better. They reached the car, and Sophie immediately claimed the back seat, pulling out her tablet. Seatbelt, Sophie, Elaine reminded her automatically. As Jack started the engine, a red sports car came tearing through the parking lot, swerving dangerously close to their vehicle. Jack cursed, yanking the wheel hard to avoid a collision. Grandpa said a bad word, Sophie gasped from the back seat. With good reason, Elaine replied, heart pounding as she watched the sports car speed away. That driver nearly hit us. Jack was fumbling with the steering wheel, his face contorted in pain. Damn it, my back. Are you okay? Elaine asked, alarmed, spasming. He grunted. Can't turn properly. The car was drifting toward a row of parked vehicles, acting on instinct. Elaine lunged across the console, grabbing the wheel and steering them clear of the potential collision. Put on the brake, she instructed calmly. I've got the wheel. Jack managed to stop the car in an empty section of the lot. For a moment, they sat in silence. The only sound Jack's labored breathing and Sophie's small, frightened whimpers from the back seat. Everyone okay? Elaine asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Fine, Jack said through gritted teeth. Back seized up when I turned the wheel. I'm scared, Sophie whispered. Elaine turned to face her granddaughter. It's all right, sweetheart. We're all safe. Grandpa's back is just giving him trouble, but we'll fix that when we get home. Should I call Mom? No need to worry her, Elaine replied. This isn't an emergency, but Grandpa's going to let me drive home, aren't you? Jack? It wasn't really a question. Jack nodded reluctantly, already maneuvering his stiff body out of the driver's seat. Elaine helped him, noticing with concern how he winced with each movement. This is more than your usual twinge, she observed as they carefully switched places. Overdid it yesterday, he admitted. Had to move some equipment alone because Miguel called in sick. You should have asked for help, Elaine scolded gently, adjusting the seat and mirrors. That's what your crew is for. Jack didn't respond, closing his eyes as Elaine carefully navigated out of the parking lot. Sophie had gone quiet in the back seat, watching her grandparents with solemn eyes. Grandma, she said finally as they reached the main road. Yes, dear, you saved us, just like a real superhero. Despite the tension of the moment, Elaine felt a smile tug at her lips. Just quick reflexes, sweetheart, and lots of practice driving with your grandpa. Still, Sophie insisted, it was brave. The drive home was mercifully uneventful. Jack remained quiet, clearly in pain despite his attempts to hide it. When they arrived, Elaine helped him to his recliner, fetched his prescription muscle relaxants, and applied a heating pad to his lower back. Rest here, she instructed. Sophie and I will find something quiet to do. The game's on, Jack said weakly, gesturing toward the television. Mariners are playing the Red Sox. Elaine turned on the TV, adjusting the volume to a background murmur. Sophie and I will be in the den if you need anything. In the den, Sophie immediately gravitated toward the bookshelf where Elaine kept the family photo albums. Can we look at the baby pictures again? I want to see Mom when she was my age. Of course, Elaine agreed, settling onto the comfortable old sofa. She patted the spot beside her, and Sophie snuggled close, smelling of strawberry shampoo and the chocolate gelato she'd had for dessert. They started with the oldest album, its pages yellowed with age, Elaine as a young bride, hair styled in the fashion of the late 1970s, Jack handsome and broad-shouldered beside her. Grandpa had so much hair, Sophie giggled. He was quite the catch, Elaine agreed, smiling at the memory of their early days together. They flipped through the chronology of their lives, the purchase of their first house, Hannah's birth, Nathan's arrival 3 years later. Holidays, birthdays, vacations at the lake. As they progressed through the albums, Elaine noticed something she'd never realized before she appeared in fewer and fewer photographs as the years went on. There she was with baby Hannah, then toddler Nathan, then both children at the beach. But as the children grew, Elaine began to disappear from the visual record, becoming instead the unseen chronicler of family milestones. By the time they reached Hannah's high school graduation album, Elaine was in barely a handful of photos. Where are you, Grandma? Sophie asked, echoing Elaine's thoughts. You're not in these pictures. I was taking them, sweetheart, Elaine explained, a strange hollowness forming in her chest. Someone had to capture the memories. But who took pictures of you? The innocent question hit Elaine with unexpected force. Who indeed? She flipped forward to Sophie's baby photos and birthday parties. Again, plenty of Jack, Hannah, Nathan, and of course Sophie herself, but Elaine appeared only occasionally, usually in group shots taken by strangers, or in the rare instances when someone thought to take the camera from her. I guess I was usually the photographer, she said finally, trying to keep her voice light. Sophie frowned. That's not fair. You should be in the pictures too. You're right, Elaine agreed, touched by her granddaughter's concern. Maybe we need to change that. I can take pictures of you, Sophie declared, reaching for her tablet. Then you'll be in the book too. Before Elaine could respond, Sophie had the camera app open and was snapping away. Smile, Grandma. Now make a funny face. Now pretend you're a queen. Elaine complied, feeling both self-conscious and strangely liberated by her granddaughter's impromptu photo shoot. When Sophie finally stopped, Satisfied with her collection, she scrolled through the results with critical intensity. These are good, she announced. But you look a little sad in this one. She held up the tablet, showing a photo where Elaine was indeed smiling, but with a certain melancholy in her eyes. Do I? Elaine asked, genuinely surprised. I wasn't trying to look sad. Sophie studied her with the unfiltered perception of childhood. Sometimes I think you're lonely. Grandma. The observation, so accurate and unexpected, caught Elaine off guard. What makes you say that? Sophie shrugged. You look at us the same way I look at kids playing when I'm not invited to join. Elaine felt tears threatening and blinked them back. That's very perceptive, Sophie, but I'm not lonely when I'm with you. I love you, Grandma, Sophie said, wrapping her small arms around Elaine's middle. Just because you're you? The simple declaration broke something open in Elaine's heart. Not because she was a good cook, or kept track of everyone's schedules, or remembered birthdays, but simply for being herself. When was the last time anyone had loved her so unconditionally? I love you too, sweetheart, she whispered, hugging her granddaughter close. More than you know. They stayed like that for a moment, until Sophie squirmed free, already moving on to the next activity. Can we make cookies, the ones with chocolate chips and cranberries? Elaine laughed, grateful for the child's resilience. I think we can manage that. Let's check on Grandpa first, though. They found Jack dozing in his recliner, the baseball game playing unwatched. Elaine adjusted his heating pad and turned to leave, but Sophie had other ideas. Grandpa, she said loudly, causing Jack to startle awake. Tell me about when you were little. Did you play baseball? Sophie, Elaine admonished gently. Grandpa needs to rest. It's okay, Jack said, shifting to a more upright position. I was actually a terrible baseball player. Too uncoordinated, but I was pretty good at climbing trees. Sophie's eyes widened. Really, how high could you climb? High enough to get stuck once. Jack chuckled. My dad had to call the fire department to get me down. No way, Sophie exclaimed, delighted by this glimpse of her grandfather's childhood mischief. Way, Jack confirmed. It was the most embarrassing day of my 10-year-old life. The whole neighborhood came out to watch. As Jack launched into the full story, complete with dramatic reenactment of his father's reaction, Elaine observed the easy rapport between grandfather and granddaughter. It had been years since she'd heard Jack tell this particular story, decades. Perhaps there was something youthful in his animation that reminded her of the man she'd fallen in love with before mortgages and business stress had worn him down. And then, Jack continued, clearly enjoying Sophie's rapt attention. Just as the fireman reached me, I got scared and peed my pants. Right there in the tree. Sophie dissolved into giggles, and even Elaine found herself laughing at the familiar punchline. For a brief, precious moment, they were simply a family sharing stories and laughter, the day's tensions temporarily forgotten. Later, as Sophie helped Elaine prepare a simple dinner grilled cheese sandwiches, Jack's comfort food, Elaine found herself thinking about Hannah's mysterious phone call and Jack's obvious back pain. There were undercurrents in her family she didn't fully understand, concerns they weren't sharing with her. Had it always been this way? Had she been so busy maintaining the infrastructure of their lives that she'd missed the actual architecture of their relationships? Grandma, the cheese is melting out the sides. Sophie's voice brought her back to the present. That means it's ready, Elaine replied, expertly flipping the sandwich to reveal a perfectly golden crust. Just how Grandpa likes it. They ate in the living room, trays on laps, the baseball game still playing in the background. Jack seemed more comfortable after his medication had kicked in, though Elaine noticed he still winced when shifting position. This is the best grilled cheese ever, Sophie declared, taking an enormous bite. It's just bread and cheese, kiddo, Jack said with a smile. Nuh-uh, Sophie insisted through her mouthful. It tastes different, like love. The simple statement hung in the air, profound in its childish wisdom. Elaine caught Jack's eye over Sophie's head, and for a moment, they shared a look of perfect understanding. This, perhaps, was what really mattered, not grand gestures or expensive restaurants, but the quiet moments of care and connection. After dinner, as Sophie helped clear the dishes, insisting she was old enough for kitchen duty, Elaine's phone rang. It was Hannah, calling to say she'd be running late. Client emergency, she explained, background noise suggesting she was still at her studio. Can Sophie stay until 7:30? Of course, Elaine assured her. Take your time. She's having fun helping us. Thanks, Mom. You're a lifesaver. As Elaine hung up, she noticed Sophie watching her intently from the doorway. Was that Mom? Is she coming soon? Not for another hour or so, Elaine replied. She has to help one of her clients. Sophie nodded, unsurprised. She's always helping clients, even on weekends. There was something in her granddaughter's tone that gave Elaine pause. Does that bother you, sweetheart? Sophie shrugged with the elaborate casualness children affect when trying to seem indifferent. Sometimes, but she says it's important to work hard so we can have nice things. Nice things are good, Elaine agreed carefully. But time together is important too. That's why I like being here, Sophie said simply. You and Grandpa have time. The observation cut deeper than Sophie could know. Yes, they had time now. Time that sometimes stretched empty and purposeless before them. But how had they used their time when they were Hannah's age, building careers and raising children? Had they given their children the attention Sophie seemed to crave? Come on, Elaine said, pushing aside these uncomfortable reflections. Let's find something fun to do before your mom comes. They settled on a card game, one that even Jack could play from his recliner. As they dealt and discarded, laughed and groaned at their fortunes, Elaine found herself memorizing the details of this ordinary moment, the way Sophie's nose scrunched when she concentrated, the rumble of Jack's laugh when he played a winning hand, the warm glow of the living room lamps against the gathering twilight outside. This, she thought, was the heart of motherhood and grandmotherhood, not the grand achievements or milestones, but the accumulated weight of thousands of such ordinary moments, strung together like beads on the necklace of a life. When Hannah finally arrived, windblown and apologetic, Sophie greeted her with enthusiasm, but lingered over her goodbyes, extracting promises from her grandparents about the upcoming science fair and more cookie baking sessions. Thanks again, Mom, Hannah said at the door. Her voice lowered as Sophie waited in the car. Today was nice. It was, Elaine agreed, though nice seemed an inadequate description for the complex emotions the day had stirred in her. She hesitated, then added, Hannah, is everything all right with the business? Her daughter's expression flickered briefly before settling into a reassuring smile. Everything's fine, just the usual growing pains. Why do you ask? Just wondering, Elaine replied, deciding this wasn't the moment to confront her about the overheard conversation. You know you can talk to us if you need to, right? I know, Mom. Hannah kissed her cheek quickly. Happy Mother's Day. Love you. Then she was gone, car headlights sweeping across the front of the house as they pulled away. Elaine stood in the doorway for a moment, watching until the taillights disappeared around the corner. Back inside, she found Jack struggling to get out of his recliner. Let me help you, she said, moving to his side. I'm not an invalid, he grumbled, but accepted her support as he rose stiffly to his feet. Just need to get to bed. This medication makes me drowsy. As she helped him upstairs and into their bedroom, Elaine noticed how heavily he leaned on her, how labored his breathing became with each step. This wasn't his usual back pain. This was something more concerning. You should see Dr. Martins tomorrow, she said as he eased onto the edge of the bed. This doesn't seem normal. It'll pass, Jack insisted, though his grimace as he bent to remove his shoes suggested otherwise. Always does. Elaine helped him with his shoes, then his shirt, noting the angry red patches on his lower back where the muscles were in spasm. At least promise you'll take it easy tomorrow. No heavy lifting at the site. Jack didn't answer directly. The Pearson project is behind schedule. Those supply chain issues are killing us. Jack. Elaine waited until he met her eyes. Your health is more important than any project. Promise me. He sighed, the fight going out of him. Fine. I'll stick to the office tomorrow. Supervising. Happy, ecstatic, she replied dryly, helping him into his pajamas. I'll bring up your water and pills. Downstairs, Elaine moved through the familiar routine of securing the house for the night checking doors, adjusting the thermostat, turning off lights. In Jack's home office, she paused to place his work phone on its charger, a task he often forgot. As she set it down, the screen lit up with a notification. Final notice, payment overdue. Elaine froze, finger hovering over the screen. She shouldn't look. Jack's business finances were his domain, as he'd reminded her countless times over the years, but the urgent capital letters gnawed at her, especially after Hannah's mysterious phone call about financial difficulties. Before she could reconsider, Elaine swiped open the notification. It was an email from their bank regarding a business line of credit. The balance, $157,000, was 3 months past due, with a warning about potential legal action if payment wasn't received within 10 days. Stunned, Elaine scrolled through the email chain, revealing increasingly urgent communications dating back months. How had Jack kept this from her? And more pressingly, Why her eyes caught on another notification. This one from an unfamiliar name, Marcus Delgado Rahanna Wilson loan status. The same Marcus from Hannah's phone conversation with shaking fingers. Elaine opened this message as well. Jack, reminder that the $50,000 personal loan to Hannah Wilson, co-signed by Elaine Wilson, is now 45 days past due. As discussed, we've applied the late fees, but regulatory requirements mandate we issue formal notices at 60 days. Please advise on how to proceed. Marcus. Elaine stared at the screen, her mind racing to process this information. A $50,000 loan in her name. She had signed no such thing, yet according to this email, she had co-signed a substantial loan for Hannah, a loan that was now significantly overdue. Combined with what she'd overheard at the restaurant, using my mother's credit was a one-time emergency measure. A disturbing picture was emerging. Had Hannah somehow used her information without permission, and was Jack aware of this? The sound of Jack calling her name from upstairs startled her into dropping the phone onto the desk. She quickly closed the email app, her heart pounding as she tried to compose herself. Coming, she called, her voice remarkably steady given the turmoil inside her. As she gathered Jack's medication and water, Elaine's mind whirled with questions and revelations. The back injury that was clearly worse than he'd admitted, the serious financial trouble with his business, Hannah's mysterious loan and apparent use of Elaine's credit without her knowledge. How long had they been keeping these secrets from her, and what else didn't she know about her own family, about her own financial situation? Climbing the stairs with deliberate slowness, Elaine made a decision. Tomorrow, while Jack was at work, she would do some investigating of her own. It was time to uncover exactly what was happening with her family's finances and her own legal standing in these matters. After 38 years of marriage, Elaine had assumed she knew everything important about their shared life. Now, on the evening of Mother's Day, she was beginning to realize how much had been hidden from her and how much she needed to discover for herself. Morning light filtered through the blinds as Elaine lay awake, watching Jack dress with painful slowness. Despite his protests, she'd insisted on calling Dr. Martins, securing an emergency appointment for later that afternoon. I've left the files for the Pearson project on your desk, she said, propping herself up on one elbow. And I put your lunch in the blue container. Jack nodded absently, wincing as he bent to tie his shoes. Thanks. Don't wait up tonight, I might be late. The doctor appointment is at 4, Elaine reminded him firmly. I'll meet you at the office to make sure you don't conveniently forget. He gave her a look of mild exasperation. I said I'd go, didn't I? Yes, but I've known you for 40 years. Jack Wilson. Your definition of I'll go often means I'll reschedule 3 times and then cancel. This earned her a reluctant smile. Fair enough. 4 o'clock, then, after Jack left, moving with the stiff carefulness of a man in significant pain, Elaine remained in bed, staring at the ceiling. The revelations from Jack's phone burned in her mind. A $157,000 credit line, 3 months overdue. A mysterious $50,000 loan supposedly co-signed by her for Hannah. Financial troubles serious enough to warrant final notices and mentions of legal action? Her first instinct was confrontation, to call Jack, demand explanations, perhaps even contact Hannah directly. But the accountant in her, dormant but not extinct, urged caution. Better to gather facts first, understand the full picture before taking action. With newfound resolve, Elaine got up and dressed in comfortable clothes, her mind mapping out a strategy. First, she needed to understand their legal and financial entanglements. For that, she needed expertise she could trust. At precisely 9:30 a.m., she called Linda Martinez, her friend from the disaster response training and a respected family law attorney. Elaine, what a pleasant surprise, Linda answered. How was your Mother's Day? Illuminating, Elaine replied dryly. Linda, I need your professional advice. When could I come see you? There was a brief pause. This sounds serious. I have a cancellation at 11. Would that work? Perfect. And Linda, I'd appreciate discretion about this. Of course, client confidentiality is sacred. After hanging up, Elaine moved to Jack's home office, a room she rarely entered except to clean or deliver coffee. It felt like foreign territory, though it was in her own home. The large oak desk dominated the space, covered with construction plans, invoices, and coffee-stained notepads. A filing cabinet stood in the corner, its drawers partially open, papers spilling out in disorganized heaps. Typical Jack, she thought with a mixture of affection and frustration. Brilliant at building things, hopeless at organizing them. She began with the filing cabinet, looking for anything related to their personal finances. The top drawer held a jumble of tax returns dating back 15 years, interspersed with warranty documents for appliances they no longer owned. The second drawer contained business receipts, some still in their original envelopes, others loose and creased. In the bottom drawer, beneath a stack of outdated catalogs, Elaine found what she was looking for: a large manila envelope labeled property documents. Inside were the deeds to their house, the mountain cabin they'd inherited from Jack's parents, and several other legal papers. She spread them on the desk, carefully examining each one. The house deed, dated 1987, listed both John Allen Wilson and Elaine Margaret Wilson as joint owners. No surprise there they'd purchased it together after selling their starter home. What had surprised her was a document she didn't recognize, a title transfer for the cabin dated just 3 years ago, moving ownership from Jack's name alone to both of them jointly. She had no memory of signing such a transfer, though her signature appeared alongside Jack's at the bottom. Next came a stack of investment account statements. Again, both their names appeared on each document, indicating joint ownership of retirement funds, stock portfolios, and money market accounts that Elaine had always assumed were solely Jack's. The combined value was substantial, over $800,000, mostly in retirement vehicles. Most shocking of all was a business filing for Wilson Construction LLC, listing Elaine as a 50% owner and chief financial officer. The document was dated 2010, coinciding with Jack's decision to incorporate his construction business. Elaine had a vague memory of signing incorporation papers, but Jack had explained it as a mere formality, a spouse consent required by the state. He had never mentioned that she was legally an equal partner in the business, or that she held the title of CFO. As the implications sank in, Elaine felt a complex mix of emotions: betrayal at having been kept in the dark, fear about potential financial liabilities she'd never agreed to knowingly, and a strange, growing anger at having been treated as incapable of understanding these matters. She took photos of key documents with her phone, returned everything to its place, and drove to Linda's office, her mind churning with questions. Linda's law practice occupied a modest suite in a professional building downtown. The reception area was warm and welcoming, with comfortable seating and abstract artwork on the walls. Linda herself greeted Elaine with a hug before ushering her into a private office. "So," Linda said once they were seated, "what's this about?" Elaine took a deep breath. "I need to understand my legal and financial position. I've discovered I may be entangled in situations I wasn't fully aware of." She explained her discoveries: the joint ownership of properties and investments, her apparent role as CFO of Jack's company, and the mysterious loan to Hannah supposedly bearing her signature. As she spoke, Linda took notes, her expression growing increasingly concerned. "Let me get this straight," Linda said when Elaine finished. "You're a 50% owner of a construction company you've never actively participated in managing, apparently so. And you're listed as a co-signer on a $50,000 loan to your daughter that you have no recollection of signing? Yes?" Linda leaned back in her chair, tapping her pen against her notepad. "Elaine, I have to ask, is there any chance you signed these documents but simply don't remember? Perhaps during a particularly busy period." "I suppose it's possible," Elaine admitted. "Jack often brings me things to sign, and I trust him. But a $50,000 loan, I'd remember that. Unfortunately, what you're describing could potentially constitute identity fraud," Linda said carefully. "Whether by your husband or daughter, using your identity to secure loans without your explicit consent is illegal." The word illegal hung in the air, heavy with implication. Elaine shook her head. "I'm not looking to press charges. I just need to understand where I stand legally. If Jack's business is in financial trouble, and I believe it is, what does that mean for me? For our retirement, our home." Linda's expression softened. "That's a practical approach. Let's start with the business entity. As a 50% owner and named CFO, you do bear responsibility for the company's liabilities, though your personal exposure may be limited by the LLC structure. And the loan to Hannah. If your signature was forged or obtained under false pretenses, you might have grounds to dispute it. However, that would mean formally accusing Hannah or Jack of fraud." Elaine winced. "Not an option." "Understood. In that case, you're legally responsible for repayment if Hannah defaults." Linda paused. "Elaine, may I make a personal observation? Please. You're in a common situation I see with many women of our generation. Despite legal protections and joint ownership, you've been functionally excluded from financial decisions that directly affect you. This creates vulnerability, regardless of intentions." The assessment was uncomfortably accurate. "So what do I do now?" "First, knowledge is power. Request your credit report immediately to see if there are other loans or accounts in your name you're unaware of. Second, Consider meeting with a financial advisor to get a comprehensive picture of your assets and liabilities. Linda hesitated. And third, have an honest conversation with Jack. Not accusatory, but direct. You need transparency going forward. Elaine nodded, already dreading that conversation. What about my immediate legal exposure if Jack's business creditors start taking action? Your jointly owned assets could be at risk, depending on how the debt is structured. The house might be protected by homestead exemptions, but investment accounts could be vulnerable. Linda wrote something on a notepad and handed it to Elaine. This is the name of an excellent financial advisor who specializes in helping women regain control of their finances. Tell her I sent you. Elaine tucked the paper into her purse. Thank you, Linda. What do I owe you for today? Linda waved dismissively. Consider this a friend's consultation, but Elaine, don't wait too long to act. Financial problems rarely improve with neglect. Back in her car, Elaine sat for several minutes, processing everything she'd learned. The digital clock on the dashboard read 12:20 p.m. She had several hours before meeting Jack at his office for the doctor's appointment. Time enough for one more fact-finding mission. At the local branch of their bank, Elaine approached the customer service desk with determined composure. The young woman behind the counter smiled professionally. Good afternoon. How can I help you today? I'd like to review all accounts associated with my name, please. Elaine presented her driver's license and bank card. I'm concerned there may be accounts or loans I'm not fully aware of. The representative's smile faltered slightly. Let me see what I can do. One moment. After several minutes of typing and frowning at her computer screen, the young woman looked up. Mrs. Wilson, I'm showing several accounts under your name, both individual and joint. For security purposes, I'll need to verify some information before proceeding. Elaine answered the security questions easily. Mother's maiden name, first pet, childhood street address. The representative nodded, apparently satisfied. I can print a summary of all your accounts with current balances. For detailed transaction histories, you'll need to request those specifically or access them through online banking. A summary would be perfect. Thank you. Minutes later, Elaine stared at the printed sheet, her hands trembling slightly. In addition to their joint checking and savings accounts, there were 3 lines of credit associated with Wilson Construction, all showing her as a guarantor. 2 were maxed out, with one, the $157,000 line she'd seen referenced in Jack's email, flagged as delinquent. There was also a personal loan listing both her and Hannah as borrowers, with a current balance of $47,500 and a status of 45 days past due. The original amount had indeed been $50,000 taken out 18 months ago. Most surprising was a home equity line of credit against their house, opened just 6 months ago, with a withdrawal of $125,000 already processed. Elaine had no recollection of agreeing to this, though again, her signature or something resembling it appeared on the documentation. Is everything in order, Mrs. Wilson? The representative asked, noting Elaine's distress. Actually, I have a question about this home equity line, Elaine said, pointing to the entry. I don't recall opening this. Could you tell me how the funds were disbursed? More typing, more frowning. It appears a cashier's check was issued to Wilson Construction LLC on December 12th of last year. Jack had taken out a second mortgage on their home to fund his struggling business without explicitly telling her what he was doing. The betrayal stung deeply. Thank you, Elaine said, folding the paper and slipping it into her purse. That's all I needed. By the time she arrived at Wilson Construction's modest office building at 3:45 p.m., Elaine had moved beyond shock to a cold, clear anger. Jack's receptionist, Marta, greeted her warmly. Mrs. Wilson, so nice to see you. Mr. Wilson is on a call, but he should be done soon. I'll wait in his office, Elaine replied, her tone brooking no argument. Marta looked surprised, but nodded, gesturing toward the hallway. Jack's work office was larger than his home one, but equally cluttered. Construction plans covered most surfaces, and a whiteboard displayed a complex project timeline with numerous items highlighted in red. The window overlooked the equipment yard, where several trucks bearing the Wilson Construction logos sat idle. Elaine settled into the visitor's chair, resisting the urge to straighten the chaos around her. This was Jack's domain, his creation, a business he'd built from a one-man operation to a company employing 20 people at its peak. She'd always admired his drive and vision, his ability to translate architectural dreams into physical reality. But now, looking at the disorganized papers and past due notices barely hidden beneath them, she saw something else: a man drowning, too proud or too scared to ask for help. The door opened, and Jack entered, surprise registering on his face. Elaine, you're early. Actually, I'm right on time. You're running late. She gestured to the clock on the wall. Your appointment is in 15 minutes. Right. He ran a hand through his thinning hair, wincing as he lowered himself into his chair. Just need to wrap up a few things, like addressing the $157,000 credit line that's 3 months overdue, Elaine asked quietly. Or explaining the home equity loan you took out on our house without discussing it with me. Jack's head snapped up, shock and guilt flashing across his features before settling into defensive anger. You've been going through my things, checking up on me. I've been discovering the truth about our financial situation, something I apparently should have done years ago. Elaine placed the bank summary on his desk. When were you planning to tell me we're on the verge of bankruptcy, Jack? After we lost the house. We're not losing the house, he insisted, though his voice lacked conviction. It's just a cash flow issue. The Pearson project will set things right once we get the next payment. And the loan to Hannah, the one with my name on it that's 45 days past due, Jack had the decency to look ashamed. She needed help with the studio expansion. The banks wouldn't approve her without a cosigner. So you forged my signature? Or did you have her do it? I didn't forge anything, Jack protested. I thought you knew. I put it in that stack of policy renewals you signed last year. The casual admission stunned Elaine. You deliberately buried a $50,000 loan document in routine paperwork, Jack. I know how it sounds, he said quickly, but you never showed interest in the financial details. You always said you trusted me to handle it. Trust isn't the same as deception. Elaine's voice rose despite her efforts to remain calm. I trusted you to be honest with me, not to make major financial decisions behind my back. What was I supposed to do? Jack demanded, frustration evident. Tell you the business was struggling, that our daughter needed help. You were finally enjoying life, volunteering, making friends. I didn't want to burden you. So instead, you risked our retirement, our home, everything we've worked for without giving me a choice in the matter. Elaine shook her head, disgusted. Do you have any idea what position you've put me in legally? I'm the CFO of this company, Jack. On paper, I'm responsible for financial decisions I never made. Jack's face paled. How did you know about that? I found the incorporation papers. Apparently, I own half this business, a fact you never bothered to mention in 13 years. A heavy silence fell between them, broken only by the ticking of the wall clock and the muffled sounds of office activity beyond the door. Jack seemed to age before her eyes, shoulders slumping in defeat. I was trying to protect you, he said finally, his voice hollow. Keep the worries away. I'm not a child to be protected from reality. Jack, I'm your wife, your partner. Elaine's anger ebbed, replaced by a profound sadness. At least I thought I was. Jack winced, and this time it wasn't from physical pain. I screwed up, Elaine. The business hit trouble when we lost the West Side contract 2 years ago. Then costs went up, good workers became hard to find, and suddenly we were operating on margins so thin they barely existed. And Hannah's loan? She came to me in confidence. Said the new location was a make or break opportunity, but she needed capital fast. The banks wanted too much collateral from her, so he gestured helplessly. She's our daughter. I wanted to help. By risking our financial security without my knowledge, I thought she'd be able to repay it quickly. Her business is doing well, he corrected hastily. She's just expanding too fast. Elaine checked the time, 3:55 p.m. We need to go to your appointment, but this conversation isn't over. Jack, not by a long shot. The doctor's visit confirmed Elaine's fears Jack had herniated a disc in his lower back, likely from lifting heavy equipment without assistance. Dr. Martin's prescribed stronger pain medication, physical therapy, and absolutely no heavy lifting for at least 6 weeks. You're not 20 anymore, Jack, the doctor admonished. You need to delegate the physical labor to your crew. On the drive home, with Jack reclining uncomfortably in the passenger seat, Elaine considered their options. The financial situation was dire, but perhaps not hopeless if they acted quickly and strategically. We need to make some changes, she said as they stopped at a red light, both in how we handle finances and how we run the business. Jack glanced at her warily. What kind of changes? First, complete transparency. I want to see all the business financials, all our personal accounts, everything. The light turned green, and Elaine accelerated smoothly. Second, we need to address these past due accounts immediately before they go to collections, or worse. With what money? Jack asked bitterly. If I had the cash, I'd have paid them already. We might need to liquidate some investments. It's not ideal, but it's better than bankruptcy. Elaine turned onto their street, her mind already organizing priorities. And third, you need to follow doctor's orders. No more heroics at the construction sites. If I'm not there supervising, things don't get done right. Jack protested. Then supervise from a distance. Use that fancy tablet Nathan got you for Christmas. Video calls, photos, there are ways to manage without physically being there. Jack was silent as they pulled into the driveway, his expression unreadable. As Elaine helped him from the car, he finally spoke. When did you get so assertive? I've always been assertive. Jack, you just weren't listening. She handed him his cane, another doctor's recommendation he'd grudgingly accepted. Besides, one of us needs to take charge of this mess, and your back isn't up to it right now. Inside, Elaine settled Jack in his recliner with his medication and a glass of water, then retreated to the kitchen to prepare dinner. As she chopped vegetables for a simple stir-fry, her mind continued processing the day's revelations and formulating plans. The immediate priority was understanding the full extent of their financial entanglements. Then came damage control, prioritizing which debts posed the greatest threat. Finally, they needed a sustainable strategy moving forward, one that acknowledged Jack's physical limitations and Elaine's newfound determination to be an active participant in their financial decisions. Her phone buzzed with a text from Hannah. Hey, Mom, can you watch Sophie this Saturday? Emergency staff training at the studio. Elaine stared at the message, a new thought forming. Hannah's business, the one supposedly doing well, despite cash flow issues, might provide insights into their family's financial troubles. Saturday would be an opportunity to observe firsthand while spending time with Sophie. Of course, she texted back. Drop her off whenever works best. Saturday morning dawned bright and clear. Hannah arrived at 7:30 a.m., a clearly sleepy Sophie in tow. Thanks for the last-minute help. Mom? Hannah said, already edging back toward her car. Staff meeting starts at 8, and I've got client consultations all afternoon. I should be done by 6. Sophie and I will be fine, Elaine assured her. Actually, we might stop by the studio later. Sophie's been wanting to show me the new location. Hannah's expression flickered with something anxiety. Oh, that's not necessary. It's still under construction. Not really visitor-friendly. All the more reason for me to see it. I could use Jack's expertise to check if your contractors are doing quality work. Elaine kept her tone light but firm. We'll probably come around noon. Maybe we can bring you lunch. Trapped. Hannah nodded reluctantly. Sure, that would be nice. Just text me when you're heading over. After Hannah left, Sophie curled up on the couch for a nap while Elaine made breakfast. By mid-morning, they were engaged in a fierce game of Monopoly, Sophie displaying an impressive grasp of property strategy for a 9-year-old. Grandma, she said as she collected rent on Boardwalk, are you and Grandpa fighting? You seem mad at each other? Elaine paused, considering how to respond. We're having some important discussions about money and how we make decisions together. It's not really fighting, but it is serious. Sophie nodded sagely. Mom and Dad had serious discussions before they got divorced. The simple observation hit Elaine like a physical blow. Of course, Sophie would interpret tension between adults through the lens of her parents' divorce 3 years earlier. This is different, sweetheart, Elaine assured her. Grandpa and I aren't getting divorced. We're just figuring out some problems together. That's good, Sophie said, relief evident in her voice. Because you're supposed to be a team, right? Like in my soccer games, everyone has different jobs, but you work together. That's exactly right, Elaine agreed, touched by the child's wisdom. And right now, my job is to help Grandpa with some business problems. Because his back hurts. Partly that, yes, and partly because sometimes 2 heads are better than 1 for solving problems. Sophie considered this while rolling the dice. Mom says she wishes she had a business partner sometimes, someone to help make decisions and share the hard stuff. Elaine filed this information away carefully. Running a business alone can be difficult. Is your mom stressed about work? She's always on her phone talking about money, Sophie replied with childish candor. And sometimes she cries when she thinks I'm asleep. The revelation tightened Elaine's chest. Hannah confident, independent Hannah was struggling more than she let on. Perhaps the studio expansion wasn't going as well as Jack believed. At 11:30, they packed up the Monopoly game and drove to a deli near Hannah's fitness studio, picking up sandwiches for lunch. The new studio location was in a recently renovated shopping center, its large windows covered with paper to hide the interior construction. Looks fancy, Sophie observed as they approached the entrance. Mom says it's going to have special equipment that the other place doesn't have. The door was unlocked, revealing a cavernous space filled with construction materials, half-installed fixtures, and scattered tools. No workers were present unusual for a weekend, when commercial renovations were typically in full swing to avoid disrupting weekday business. Hello, Elaine called out. Hannah? Hannah emerged from a back office, her expression shifting from surprise to forced brightness when she spotted them. Mom, Sophie, you're early. Or, we brought lunch, Sophie announced, holding up the bag of sandwiches. Turkey for you, Mom. That's thoughtful. Thank you. Hannah gestured vaguely around the space. Sorry about the mess. The contractors are behind schedule. Elaine surveyed the room with a critical eye, noticing several red flags from her years as a construction wife exposed wiring that didn't meet code. Flooring installed before painting was complete, support beams that appeared inadequately reinforced for the equipment they would need to support. Where are your contractors today? She asked casually. Hannah's smile tightened. They had another job. They'll be back Monday. Hmm. Elaine walked further into the space, noting more issues. Hannah, some of this work doesn't look up to standard. Has Jack seen it? Dad's been busy, Hannah replied defensively. Besides, I have a professional contractor, one who leaves exposed wiring near where water pipes will be installed. Elaine pointed to a particularly concerning area. That's a serious safety hazard, not to mention a code violation. Hannah's facade cracked slightly. The inspector hasn't come yet? They'll fix it before then. And if they don't, Elaine pressed. Hannah, this is your business, your livelihood. You can't afford shortcuts that might lead to injuries or closure. I know that, Hannah snapped, then immediately looked guilty. Sorry, it's just, everything's more expensive than I budgeted for. Every time I turn around, there's another cost I didn't anticipate. Sophie had wandered to the far end of the studio, examining the new ballet bar installation, giving the adults a moment of privacy. Is that why you're behind on the loan payments? Elaine asked quietly. The one with my name on it. Hannah's face paled. Dad told you? Not willingly. I found out on my own. Elaine kept her voice level, determined to understand rather than accuse. Hannah, why didn't you come to me directly? Why go through your father and use my credit without my knowledge? Would you have agreed if I had asked? Hannah countered, a hint of her childhood defiance showing through. I don't know, Elaine admitted honestly, but I deserved the chance to make that decision myself. Hannah's shoulders slumped. The bank turned me down for a business loan, said I was overextended already. Dad suggested using your excellent credit history as leverage. He said he'd handle it, that you wouldn't mind helping. And the late payments? The first location's profits are down since the mall lost its anchor store. Foot traffic has dropped by 30%. Hannah looked genuinely distressed. I've been putting every cent into finishing this location, hoping to recoup losses with the expanded services. Elaine regarded her daughter thoughtfully. Hannah had always been the risk-taker of the family, confident to the point of recklessness sometimes. But beneath the polished exterior, she was still the little girl who'd climb too high in trees, then freeze, unable to get down without help. You're in over your head, Elaine observed, not unkindly. Aren't you, to her surprise? Hannah's eyes filled with tears. Everyone thinks I'm this big success story, Hannah Wilson, entrepreneur extraordinaire. But I'm one bad month away from losing everything. Mom, and now I've dragged you and Dad into my mess. Oh, sweetheart. Elaine moved forward, pulling her daughter into a hug, something Hannah hadn't allowed in years. Why didn't you tell us how bad it was? Pride, shame, fear of disappointing you? Hannah's laugh was watery. Take your pick. Listen to me, Elaine said, holding Hannah at arm's length. Financial problems can be solved. Businesses fail and people start over. What can't be fixed is the damage secrecy does to relationships. Hannah wiped her eyes, nodding. I know, I wanted to prove I could do this on my own. Independence doesn't mean isolation. Hannah, even the most successful people need help sometimes. Elaine glanced around the half-finished studio. Now, let's eat lunch, and then you're going to show me your business plan and financial projections. Maybe a fresh pair of eyes will help. Over sandwiches. Hannah reluctantly shared the details of her financial situation. The original studio was barely breaking even, while the new location was costing nearly double the initial estimates. The $50,000 loan had been depleted primarily on essential equipment and initial renovation costs. The contractor promised a 6-week timeline, Hannah explained. We're now in week 14, and they're demanding another $30,000 to complete the work. That sounds like contract fraud, Elaine noted, her mind already cataloging potential legal remedies. Do you have a written agreement with specific deliverables and timelines? Hannah looked embarrassed. Sort of, it's not as detailed as it probably should be. Let me see it. The contract was little more than a quote with vague descriptions of work to be performed, no completion date, and numerous loopholes allowing for additional charges. No wonder Hannah was being taken advantage of. First step, Elaine decided, we need to pause this project immediately and get a proper assessment of what's been done and what remains. Jack may be injured, but he knows reputable contractors who can give us an honest evaluation. But I've already paid them most of the money, Hannah protested, and they've completed less than half the work, Elaine countered. We may need legal help to recover some of your investment, but at minimum, we can stop throwing good money after bad. As they talked, Elaine formulated a plan, one that addressed both Hannah's immediate business crisis and the larger family financial issues. By the time Sophie grew bored with exploring the studio and rejoined them, Elaine had a clear path forward. I have a proposition for you, she told Hannah, but it will require honesty, transparency, and a willingness to accept help on others' terms, not just your own. Hannah looked wary, but nodded. I'm listening. First, we deal with your contractor situation legally. Linda can help with that. Elaine ticked points off on her fingers. Second, we reevaluate the expansion timeline, perhaps phasing it rather than attempting everything at once. Third, we address the loan situation with a proper repayment plan you can actually sustain. And what do you get out of this? Hannah asked, the businesswoman in her emerging despite her vulnerable position. Elaine smiled slightly. Your father's company needs help too, administrative help that I can provide, but not full-time. I propose a trade. I'll help you organize your business finances and planning 3 days a week, while you employ me part-time to do the same for your father's company the other 2 days. You want to work for us? Hannah sounded incredulous. Mom, no offense, but your business knowledge is decades out of date. My accounting principles are solid, and I can learn the new software systems, Elaine replied with more confidence than she felt. Besides, what I lack in technical knowledge, I make up for in life experience and attention to detail, something both you and your father could use more of. Hannah appeared to be considering the proposal seriously. Dad would never agree to this. He's too proud. Let me handle your father, Elaine said, already anticipating Jack's resistance. Right now, I need to know if you're willing to accept my help and my oversight while you get your business back on solid ground. After a long moment, Hannah nodded. Okay, but I have conditions too. This stays between us. I don't want Nathan or anyone else knowing how close I came to failure. Agreed. As long as there's complete transparency between the three of us moving forward. Elaine extended her hand formally. Partners, Hannah took it, a ghost of a smile appearing. Partners. God help us all. That evening, after dropping Sophie off with her father, Hannah's ex-husband, Elaine returned home to find Jack attempting to review construction plans at the kitchen table, his reading glasses perched precariously on his nose. How was your day with Sophie? He asked without looking up. Do anything exciting? We visited Hannah's new studio location, Elaine replied, setting her purse down and taking the seat opposite him. Jack, did you know she's being swindled by her contractors? That got his attention. What? No, she never mentioned any problems. Because she's too proud to admit she's in trouble, rather like someone else I know. Elaine gave him a pointed look. The workmanship is substandard. The project is months behind schedule, and they're demanding more money to complete it. Jack's protective father instincts visibly activated. Who's the contractor? I'll have a word with them. You'll do no such thing with your back in its current state, Elaine countered firmly. Besides, I've already started handling it. You, how? Elaine outlined the situation and her proposed solution, her part-time involvement in both businesses, the legal strategy for addressing the contractor issues, and the revised loan repayment plan she'd worked out with Hannah. You can't be serious, Jack said when she finished. Elaine, running a construction company requires experience, industry knowledge, which you have in abundance. She interrupted. I'm not suggesting I take over operations. I'm offering to handle the administrative and financial aspects, the parts you've always hated and, frankly, neglected. I haven't neglected. 3 months of unpaid credit lines, a second mortgage I knew nothing about. Elaine's voice remained calm, but firm. Jack, you're brilliant at construction. You understand materials and methods and management of crews, but the business side is drowning you, and your back injury is the universe telling you it's time to delegate. Jack stared at her, a complex mix of emotions crossing his face, defensiveness, pride, and finally, reluctant acknowledgement of the truth in her words. Even if I agreed, he said slowly, you'd need training, software systems, industry terminology, vendor relationships is not something you can pick up overnight. I don't expect to, but I'm a quick learner, and more importantly, I'm invested in our future in a way no hired administrator would be. Elaine reached across the table, covering his hand with hers. Jack, we're at a crossroads. Your health is compromised. Our finances are in jeopardy, and our daughter is following in your footsteps of prideful isolation. Something has to change. The silence stretched between them, filled with the weight of decades of partnership, the comfortable patterns they'd established, and the uncertain terrain ahead if they chose a different path. Finally, Jack sighed, his fingers turning to intertwine with hers. 2 days a week to start. We'll see how it goes. Elaine smiled, victory and apprehension mingling in her chest. 2 days it is. We begin Monday. The following weeks passed in a blur of new routines and steep learning curves. Mondays and Thursdays. Elaine worked alongside Jack at Wilson Construction, absorbing the complexities of project management software, vendor contracts, and client billing procedures. The initial awkwardness of her presence in his domain gradually gave way to a grudging appreciation for her organizational skills and attention to detail. Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Fridays were spent at Hannah's fitness studio, where Elaine implemented new accounting systems, renegotiated with suppliers, and helped interview potential instructors for the expanded class schedule. With Linda's legal assistance, they had successfully extricated Hannah from the fraudulent contractor arrangement and secured a more reputable company to complete the renovations, albeit on a more modest scale than originally planned. The evenings were filled with online courses in modern accounting practices and business software. Elaine's reading glasses perched on her nose as she navigated unfamiliar digital territory with determined focus. Jack would often sit nearby, ostensibly watching baseball, but occasionally offering insights on industry-specific terminology or practices. One such evening, as Elaine struggled with a particularly complex project budgeting module, Jack muted the television and turned to her with unusual hesitation. "I've been thinking," he began, "about what you said about us being at a crossroads." Elaine looked up from her laptop, surprised by his serious tone. "Yes, my back isn't getting better as quickly as I'd hoped. Dr. Martin says I might need surgery if physical therapy doesn't show more improvement soon." "Oh, Jack," concern flooded her. "Why didn't you tell me? I'm telling you now," he pointed out with a small smile. "That's progress, right? Significant progress," she acknowledged. "What does this mean for your work?" Jack sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Even with surgery and successful recovery, I won't be able to handle the physical demands of construction supervision much longer. I'm 65. Elaine, maybe it's time to consider what comes next." The admission vulnerability from a man who had defined himself by physical strength and capability for decades moved Elaine deeply. "Have you thought about what that might look like?" "Vaguely. Selling the business has always been the retirement plan, but in its current financial state, it's not worth much." He met her eyes directly. "Unless we turn things around, you've done more in 3 weeks to organize the administrative side than I managed in 3 years," Jack admitted. "The clients notice it too prompt invoicing, detailed project updates, clear communication. It's making a difference." Warmth spread through Elaine at this unexpected acknowledgement. "Thank you for noticing, but it's still your expertise that makes the business valuable, which is why I've been considering a shift in our business model." Jack leaned forward, enthusiasm replacing his earlier gravity. "What if we transitioned from direct construction to consulting and project management? I could leverage my experience without the physical strain, and your organizational skills would be even more central to operations." Elaine blinked, surprised by the radical suggestion. "That's a significant pivot. Would our current clients follow us into a new model?" "Some would, others wouldn't. But we might attract a different clientele altogether, developers who need expertise but want to hire their own crews, homeowners tackling major renovations who need professional guidance." Jack's eyes brightened with the energy of new possibilities. "We could even specialize in project rescue coming in to fix situations like Hannah's, where things have gone off the rails." The idea was both terrifying and exhilarating, a complete reinvention of Wilson construction knowing of the Wilsons themselves at an age when most couples were settling into comfortable retirement routines. "It would mean more training for both of us," Elaine noted, her practical side engaging with the concept. "Different insurance requirements, new marketing approaches. The community college offers a small business development program specifically for entrepreneurs making significant business model changes," Jack replied, clearly having researched this already. 16-week certificate, 2 evenings a week plus some weekend workshops. You want us to go back to school together." The image of them sitting side by side in a classroom, decades after their formal education had ended, struck Elaine as both amusing and oddly romantic. "Why not we could learn the new business framework properly, build a network with other local entrepreneurs, maybe even find potential clients?" Jack's enthusiasm was infectious. Besides, it would be cheaper than making expensive mistakes through trial and error. Elaine considered the proposal, seeing both its potential and its challenges. What about Hannah? I've committed to helping her business. We'll maintain that arrangement, Jack assured her. In fact, her situation could become a case study for our new consulting approach. If we can turn around her studio finances, it's a powerful proof of concept. You've really thought this through, Elaine observed, impressed by his thoroughness. I've had a lot of time to think while lying on ice packs, Jack replied wryly. And watching you these past weeks, seeing you come alive again with purpose and challenge, has made me realize how much we've both been coasting. Maybe this is our chance for a second act. A second act. The phrase resonated deeply with Elaine, echoing the quiet yearnings she'd barely acknowledged even to herself. Not retirement, but reinvention. Not an ending, but a new beginning. Okay, she said finally, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. Let's do it. Let's become students again and business partners in truth, not just on paper. Jack's smile genuine, boyish, reminiscent of the young man who had proposed over tiramisu decades ago, warmed her from within. Partners, he agreed, extending his hand formally. Elaine took it, sealing their new pact. Partners. As they sat together, hands still joined, the future unfolding before them with new possibilities and shared purpose. Elaine reflected on the strange journey that had begun with a disappointing Mother's Day lunch. What had seemed like an ending, the painful recognition of her invisibility within her own family, had instead become a catalyst for transformation. There would be challenges ahead: Jack's health, Hannah's business struggles, the financial hole they needed to climb out of, but for the first time in years, Elaine felt equipped to face them, not as Jack's supportive wife or Hannah's helpful mother, but as Elaine Wilson, an equal partner with valuable skills and perspectives of her own. The house's brain was finally taking her rightful place at the table, ready to write a new chapter in the story of her life.